Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. David Jevons is the CEO of CipherTrace, and he states that almost every bank in Japan, is beginning to use XRP. A rather bold claim, and I have a lot of thoughts on this. And what is it that he could specifically be talking about? And in what capacity are all these banks, quote unquote, beginning to use XRP? So I'm going to be diving into that. That's the vast majority I'm going to talk about in this video. I will wrap up with something else that I found interesting, though. It's a piece from The Block Crypto titled "At least 18 Central Banks Are Developing Sovereign Digital Currencies." But before we go any further, if you would please ever so delicately tap that like button, it helps out the YouTube channel. It doesn't cost you anything, but it would be good, so if you'd be willing to consider doing that, just know from the bottom of Moon Lambo's heart, he definitely appreciates that. And also, it's a cold hard fact that Moon Lambo is the stupidest name of anyone in the entire XRP community. And if you agree, in a show of solidarity, subscribe to the Moon Lambo channel. Alright, so I first came across this in my Twitter feed last night. And this is this tweet from, and it's pretty late in the evening, so yeah, even here it says 10:50 p.m., and it was pretty late. I was already laying in bed. And so it's from Stephen Bull from the Deep. Earth-shattering news. In Japan, almost every bank is starting to adopt XRP. And there's this little video clip that's about 20 seconds long. I ended up finding out what this was from. It was from a Rakuten video that went, I think, about 37 minutes long. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched, I don't know, a chunk of it, maybe 8 or so minutes of it. And I think that was the only blurb, if I had to guess, that had anything to do with XRP. So I want to give you a little bit of background and then specifically where I think this is all going ultimately here. But this little blurb, again, this little clip here, it's about 20 seconds long here. And so who is this guy talking about almost all banks are beginning to use XRP? Well, he's not exactly a nobody. He kind of knows what he's talking about here. So David Jevons, actually, I found him right here on the Twitters right here, and just want to learn a little bit more about him. So he's CEO of CipherTrace, Bitcoin investor since 2011. So he's an OG. Cryptocurrency and smart contract enthusiast since 1999. That's what he wrote on his Twitter profile explaining who he is, and I thought, since 1999, well, cryptocurrencies didn't exist, so maybe conceptually he was somehow, I don't know, looking into this type of thing, and smart contracts. Don't know exactly why he put the date 1999, but apparently the point is he's been doing this a long time, and he's an anti-phishing activist. Not for sport. We're not talking FISH. We're talking PHISH. You know, the kind where people steal passwords, that type of thing. And so he spoke at this conference, the Rakuten Technology Conference. And I want you to understand who this guy is, so that you understand that he's not just some fly-by-night type of individual stating something like this. And then again, after that, I want to share with you what exactly is it that he might be talking about in terms of actual adoption. So here's the Rakuten website, and again, citing that he's the CEO of CipherTrace and the fact that he's going to be speaking at their conference this year. And this video, by the way, it came out, I think it was on Christmas, I want to say. I looked at the date before I recorded. I'm pretty sure it was the video from Rakuten Tech on YouTube came out on Christmas. Anyway, so David is a highly experienced executive in the Bitcoin blockchain, payments, email security, anti-phishing, secure messaging, and internet security industries. He has a strong background in public and private company management, a deep experience with venture capital funding, technology marketing, IPO, mergers, and acquisitions. Founded and sold 3 internet security companies. Inventor of 17 issued U.S. patents for security and encryption. A founder and chairman of a leading security nonprofit, the APWG, who runs e-crime conferences around the world since 2003. Expert in virtual currencies, Bitcoin and blockchain, financial cryptography, internet security, payments, encryption, enterprise security, iOS and Android security. So no slouch by any means. And so here's his website here. By the way, the first thing that pops up on the screen, and this is why I started thinking, okay, this guy, he's being an adult about the way that they're approaching this. Look at this. The first thing that pops up when you go to the website states crypto risk intelligence for banks. Specifically banks. So he is well versed with what's going on here. And you can see cryptocurrency intelligence solutions for more than 87% of global virtual assets. He goes on to talk in the video from a chunk of what I saw from the video. And again, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched the pertinent parts. And he did go on to talk a bit about anti-money laundering. And so he's all about the embrace of cryptocurrencies, but wants everything to be regulatory compliant. And so it wasn't surprising to me that I even went back to this piece, and this is from May of 2019. Rakatan Wallet partners with CipherTrace to assure safety of its upcoming crypto exchange. And here's a quote from David Jevons, again, CEO of CipherTrace, who made this bold claim about XRP beginning to actually kind of get used by pretty much all banks in Japan. Here's a quote from him. We have made significant strides as an industry to make the cryptocurrency market grow and become more trustable. Rakatan Wallet cares about its customers and will work with CipherTrace to make sure that exchanges have optimal protections for mainstream adoption. It is our hope that proper compliance, transparency, and increased trust will lead to more and more participation in the crypto global market. Which brings us to this piece right here, titled Ripple's XRP is being adopted by almost every bank in Japan. Every Japanese bank, CipherTrace CEO. All right, David Jevons, the CEO of blockchain sleuth CipherTrace, made a bombshell announcement that almost every Japanese bank was starting to use the cryptocurrency at the annual Rakuten Technology Conference. And here's the exact quote now. I want to read it to you verbatim. So, there's over 1,600 cryptocurrencies that use blockchain. All of us have probably heard about Bitcoin, some of us about Ethereum. In Japan, almost every bank is starting to work with what is called XRP. Yes, absolutely. And so I was listening for context too, because sometimes entities can talk about Ripple when they mean XRP or XRP when they mean Ripple, kind of use them interchangeably. That's not what he was doing here. I listened, and in proper context, he was clearly talking about the digital asset, the cryptocurrency, XRP. And so what does this actually look like? Because if you Google search the webernets, I'm telling you, there's not a whole lot about on-demand liquidity having to do with Japan, other than what you can find some articles where there's lots of talk, not surprisingly, about SBI, and Ripple partnerships and news just on that front. But in general, corridors being built out around Japan, you really don't see that. And so the only thing that came to my mind, which is why I pulled this up, there was this article from Crypto Newsflash titled FlashFX CEO. And by the way, FlashFX, quick reminder for some of you may remember, but there's so many businesses out there, I don't fault you if you don't recall. FlashFX is a member of RippleNet, and they are using on-demand liquidity, which of course utilizes XRP as a bridge currency, and they are all about it. They spoke a good bit about praises about XRP and on-demand liquidity at Swell in Singapore this year. So, FlashFX CEO. Ripple's on-demand liquidity requires ramp-up time. Swift will stay. And I'm not going to get into the bulk of what this article covers. I just want to cite this. They kind of talk about how, Swift's going to be here for a little while, and Ripple's on-demand liquidity kind of needs to establish itself, which I think is a fair point. It's all, the whole ecosystem is being built out here. But just scroll down, what they're talking about is a new corridor, from Australia, and I've talked a little bit about that. And so here's the closest you can get to actual public talk about a corridor to Japan utilizing on-demand liquidity, and I have covered this on the channel, so just kind of putting pieces together here. And so there's a couple sentences here from this article. Also, FlashFX is planning to expand the on-demand liquidity service to Japan. FlashFX could take this step with the help of SBI RippleNet member in Japan by 2020 first quarter, which was obviously coming up here at the end of 2019. And so what would that look like? Well, understand that when we're talking about entities that at the ends of these transactions, as far as on-demand liquidity is concerned, they're going to be banks, financial institutions, remittance companies, and then, of course, you have the liquidity providers in between, right? Making markets, so to speak. And so if you have a bank in Japan and you have FlashFX in Japan, you don't need both to complete the transaction. So what were they talking about? FlashFX could take this step with the help of SBI. Well, the only way that would actually make sense is if you're talking about a multi-hop. Now, a multi-hop could make plenty of sense because then you're talking about a transaction from one end through the liquidity provider to FlashFX in Japan, and then that can hop over to whatever local bank, in which case as far as a bank actually touching XRP or quote-unquote testing it, whatever you want to call it, wouldn't necessarily be the case. They don't need to hold it. That's the purpose of a multi-hop. You just take advantage of somebody else facilitating this XRP transaction, right? Cross-border transaction utilizing XRP as a bridge currency. And so I thought, well, that doesn't really sound in line with what he's talking about. But there's other stuff too. I can't remember. Did I pull it up for this video? Maybe I can't remember if I did. Maybe I didn't. But I was looking at an article before I recorded here, and it was talking about what's it called, the Money Tap app from SBI. Maybe I did have it in one. I got too many tabs open right now. I was reading all sorts of stuff before recording this thing. But then there is an app, and Yoshitaka Kitao, of course, is the head honcho over at SBI, stated that that app, which is being used domestically primarily at this point, will ultimately take advantage of XRP. So I thought, okay, well, they must have broader ambitions for this particular app. If they're talking about utilizing XRP, well, XRP only makes sense if it's not just for domestic transactions. It doesn't really help there. If you're not converting from one fiat currency to another, there's really not a purpose for it. It doesn't serve anything. But if you're talking about broader implications, converting from one fiat currency to another, utilizing this app, well, that's the scope of that type of approach to going to market. That's much broader, much larger, and so that's why I suspect they must have much bigger plans for this app, or even if not specifically for that app, they want to interoperate with other apps, and then XRP could be a bridge currency. Maybe that's part of it. Who knows if they got other partnerships out there that we're just not privy to? That's possible too. But as far as the actual banks in Japan using it, look, understand this, like, as far as the way money moves around Japan, it was messed up. Okay, it was messed up before Ripple got in there. And I wish I could. I actually was hunting a little bit because there's a video. I could not find it, but there was a video where Brad Garlinghouse is talking about the rails, and maybe somebody else spoke to it. It might have been Ashish Burl. I can't really remember because it's been over a year since I saw this video, and I really wish I could have found it for you guys. But basically, they're talking about how the rails were so messed up, just for payments. Forget settlement for a moment. We're just talking domestically in Japan. Like, it was so inefficient, and banks weren't communicating with each other. They didn't have partnerships, that it was impossible to send payments, just the actual payment portion of this. And so, given the fractured nature of payments in Japan, the banks started to look at Ripple technology, whether it was a year or two ago, however long ago it was, when this article came out. Of course, they started planning before that. I'm just saying, whenever it was that this article came out, and they said, hey, wait a minute, this X-Current thing, which was what the payments portion was known as back then, can we use this just to facilitate payments within our own country? And they're like, yeah, it wasn't designed for that specifically, just to purely be used within just one country, but yeah, with the nature of how messed up your system is, frankly, yes, the answer is yes, you actually can. And so you got all those banks on RippleNet automatically. So as far as them testing XRP, well, if there are all sorts of internal tests and they're beginning to use it in that sense, maybe that's what he meant. But beyond that, corridors need to be built out, and we need to see exactly where they're going to connect. What are the other ends if you're talking about a corridor from Japan to what? And so we don't have that now. Ultimately, there's going to be a bazillion. There's going to be roughly 11 billion. Seriously, 11 billion corridors. That's what's going to be open. It's all in good time, though. It's going to take a hot minute, but that is indeed what's coming. So until those get announced, I'm kind of like, okay, testing it and using it in what way? Because again, the direct quote here was, in Japan, almost every bank is starting to work with what is called XRP. Now, that could mean almost anything. And so that's why I don't want to overly hype it, but I want to acknowledge that it's significant. To me, it's meaningful. This is somebody that's in the know and understands this is the direction that they're going. In terms of actual adoption, well, you need the markets to be made, you need sufficient liquidity, and XRP is currently illiquid to just completely replace all of what's happening in terms of Nostro accounts, those pre-funded accounts the world over. But it won't stay like that, because there's real utility to this, and people will continue to figure it out. So no matter what, I just want to be clear, I do think it's substantial. I just wish we had more specifics on exactly what kind of work it is, because he used the word work that's being done with XRP there. All right, next piece I got from XRP Crypto Wolf. Thank you very much, good sir. I do appreciate it, and shout out to you. At least 18 central banks are developing sovereign digital currencies. The list of central banks developing sovereign digital currencies, or central bank digital currency, CBDC, as they are more commonly known, continues to grow. According to research from The Block, of the 60-plus central banks analyzed, 18 have publicly acknowledged the development and or launch of their own CBDC. The most popular platform used by these central banks appears to be R3's Corda Enterprise Ledger. From our list, at least 4 countries/central banks have issued and launched their own digital currencies. The remaining 14 are either developing these currencies or launching pilot programs with third-party blockchain software providers. Now, of course, with R3's Corda, you can settle to XRP. That's kind of cool, kind of significant, right? And separate from that, even if that weren't the case, all of these currencies, all of these ledgers, are going to need to be connected somehow if you're going to convert one currency to another, so you still kind of need XRP. But anyway, that's it for this video, though. Thanks so much for stopping by. I am not a financial advisor. Do not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo!